This is Decision 2009. Tonight, the City Comptroller Runoff Debate. And now, from our New York One studios in Manhattan, here's New York One political anchor, Dominic Carter.
Good evening and welcome. Tonight's debate is co-sponsored by the city's Campaign Finance Board. The board is a nonpartisan, independent city agency that administers the city's voluntary campaign finance program, which multiplies the impact of New Yorkers' small contributions by matching them with public funds. The board also oversees debates, which are mandatory for candidates who join the program and are sponsored by media organizations selected by the board. Tonight's debate is being sponsored by New York One, New York One Noticias, WNYC Radio, the New York Daily News, and Time Warner Cable. Joining me in questioning the candidates tonight is Erin Einhorn of the Daily News. Now let's introduce the two candidates. The order in which they are sitting and speaking was determined earlier today by a random drawing. And we welcome David Yatsky and John Liu. And so we start this way, gentlemen. Many New Yorkers have only been exposed to this campaign by seeing television ads. And I want to show each of you your opponent's ads, at least one that is, and get your reaction. Now, Councilman Yatsky, let's watch a John Liu ad.
Maybe it's because he came here at 5 and by 7 had to work in a sweatshop to make ends meet. John Liu never forgot what it's like to struggle for every cent. As councilman, he's pushed to give more opportunities to women and minorities and expose massive fraud at the MTA that saved New Yorkers millions. Working in finance taught Liu how to account for every penny, but working in that sweatshop as a kid taught him why we need to.
I want to make sure that everyone gets an economic fair shake.
Okay, Councilman Yatsky, what do you think of that ad?
Well, I think that ad certainly, it's well done and it tugs at the emotions. But you know what? There's a lot of substance at stake in this controller's job. These are tough times. I know that New Yorkers out there are struggling in this economy. The lines at the food pantries are longer than they've been in decades. Hundreds of thousands of New Yorkers have lost their jobs. We need a controller that's going to be dead serious about getting rid of waste in the budget and standing up to the special interests that are behind a lot of that wasted spending. I'm running because I've got a record that tells New Yorkers that's exactly what I'll do. Not just campaign promises, a record that they can count on. So, took on the real estate lobby to close loopholes for luxury developers, created jobs with the incentives for film and TV production, worked with Chuck Schumer to pass path-breaking gun control legislation, Violence Against Women Act. It's a record that tells New Yorkers not just press conferences, not just talk, not just pretty ads, but that I will do the job that needs to be done. And right now, with this budget gap that we're facing, if we don't get rid of the waste, we're not going to be able to afford the things that New Yorkers need. Teachers, police officers, Meals on Wheels, keep the senior centers open. That's why the New York Times endorsed me. That's why the Daily News, Chuck Schumer. I'm proud. That's why Melinda Katz, who was running in this race until the primary day, I'm proud that she's endorsed me. And it's not just, I'm not saying viewers vote for me because they say so. The reason they gave was I have the stronger record that tells you I will get the job done.
Okay, Councilman Liu, you have a 45-second rebuttal.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to thank all the viewers for watching tonight because next Tuesday will be an important election. I'm running for city comptroller because I have the professional qualifications for this job. I was a manager at a global consulting firm for many years before I was elected to the city council. In the city council, I've gained a deep understanding of how city government works. I'm going to combine that experience, my financial expertise, along with my knowledge of government to work best for the people of New York as city comptroller. And I will do so with a perspective towards the struggles that millions and millions of New Yorkers today and in the past go through. The same kinds of struggles that my family and I went through when we first immigrated here from Taiwan, when my mom worked in a garment factory, a sweatshop for many, many years, and where I, as a kid at age 7, also got my first job in that very same factory and learning firsthand why they call that place a sweatshop. It is my professional qualifications, it is my understanding of city government with the perspective of the struggle that millions of people go through in this city that equips me best to be New York City Comptroller.
Okay, Councilman Lou, now let's watch one of Mr. Yatsky's ads.
You hire an accountant who doesn't tell the truth. That's the problem with Comptroller candidate John Liu. He says he returned contributions from people who got city contracts. Not true. Liu's commercial claims he found fraud at the MTA. Also untrue. And get this, Liu claims he worked in a sweatshop, but it never happened. His father was actually a top bank manager.
There's a better choice. The Times News and Chuck Schumer endorsed David Yatsky for his work on gun control, housing, and his integrity.
Okay, Councilman Lou, what do you think of that ad?
Well, Dominic, I have to say that I'm saddened by the ad. I'm saddened because New Yorkers shouldn't have to go through this when there are so many critical issues at stake and why the Comptroller's office is so important. I'm trying to get everybody to come out to vote next Tuesday. And I have to say, Dave, I'm personally saddened because 2 weeks ago when we debated here, you talked about how you were running a campaign solely based on the issues. Just last Friday at a news conference in front of City Hall, you talked about how you were going to run a positive campaign based on the issues and your qualifications. And you know, this kind of mudslinging is not something that New Yorkers want to see. I want to engage in the issues. I want to have a substantive conversation with you about your qualifications, my qualifications, and the voters will decide on Tuesday, next Tuesday, because again, there is so much at stake. I'm looking to institute financial reforms in the city's budgeting process to eliminate the ongoing waste that takes place, even as we're cutting budgets to senior centers, to schools throughout the city. I'm looking to use my experience as a pension actuary for many years to strengthen the pension plans, to make sure that the future of our workers and retirees are protected. And I'm looking to use the full procurement powers, the power to approve every contract by the city comptroller, to ensure that jobs are created and that everybody has an economic fair shake.
Thank you, Councilman Lou. Councilman Yatsky, your rebuttal.
Well, you know, I think there are clear differences between the candidates here. There are differences in terms of record of accomplishment, and you know, Dominic, you showed that ad. We also ran ads that talk a lot about my record of accomplishment on affordable housing, on bringing jobs to the city, on cleaning up our environment. I think there is a difference in terms of our vision for the office. I've laid out clear plans for how to use the Comptroller's office to get rid of waste and get the city's economy back on track. But there's also been a difference in the campaigns that we've run. And John, I've been saddened and I guess disappointed by the campaign that you've run, because I know that you do believe in public service and issues. But repeatedly throughout this campaign, you've run ads that contain claims that just aren't true. And you know, the facts just don't add up. Your ad says you found 2 sets of books at the MTA. The Daily News said that was actually done by 2 previous, the state controller and the IBO. You said in our last debate that you returned contributions from people that you'd steered city contracts to. In truth, you hadn't. The Daily News again ran a story saying untrue. These aren't my words. Daily News says played fast and loose with the facts. New York Times significantly embellished. New York Post said flimsy with the truth. I do think that in these times when New Yorkers are struggling with very tough decisions, New Yorkers are there are people deciding, should I move to a cheaper apartment so I can afford my child's college education? Should I go to the doctor or hope that things are okay because I don't have the money right now? They need a controller that will be honest and tell them the truth about the hard choices we're facing, so then we can make those choices and get out of this mess we're in. I think there are differences on record, on vision for the office, and yes, on honesty and integrity.
And Dominic, let me say this, that you know, I certainly have been truthful about my record. It's all there. You can check it. You can read the transcripts in the city council. You can look at what's been published. The fact of the matter is, Dave, you know, there's an old saying. The saying goes like this: people who live in glass houses shouldn't throw stones. And if you look at your own record and what you have promised people, your constituents, the people of New York, and then how you changed at a moment's notice, at a whim, you look at what you promised your constituents, that you would uphold the results of 2 referendum, that you would not vote to change term limits except through referendum. And you've maintained that position for months until all of a sudden it was slightly different, and then the New York Times and the major newspapers started to question you about exactly what your position was. And then at the last moment, even though you assured so many of us in the City Council that you were going to be with us to oppose the change in term limits, that you voted for it. And this has been an issue that goes on and on. It goes to public confidence, public trust. And so let's lay the facts out as they really are. There is a clear record, a record of accomplishment that I am running on, and I will vouch for my integrity any day, anytime anybody has any question for it. Bring it on, because I certainly am ready to stand for it.
Councilman Yasky, before we move on.
Yeah, may I just respond to that a second? You know, because there's another saying. I know you're a Mets fan. Casey Stengel, you say you can look it up, and the facts that were displayed in that ad, they're not my words. Those were the New York Daily News, the New York Times, New York Post saying fast and loose with the truth, flimsy, significant embellishment. And I think those are genuine issues here. I think that New Yorkers need to know that they can count on their controller to be honest with them. You know, I was endorsed today by the leaders of several of the organizations representing police officers, and one of them said, this is my members' pensions at stake. And I would say directly to New Yorkers who work for this city, these are your pension dollars that the controller is investing. You need to know that it's somebody that you can believe who's telling the truth. And throughout this campaign, John, the facts that you've put on TV just don't square with the facts on the record.
Well, you mentioned the New York Times, the New York Post, the Daily News. In fact, you only cite one source in your so-called commercials. And you know, the fact of the matter is that there are other issues that we really need to look at. You have maintained a position that that all discretionary funding should be banned, and I asked you about this at the last debate.
Okay,
and it still begs the question: why do you want to ban discretionary funds, member items, now when in the past you gave out more than 48 of the 51 members of the City Council millions of dollars of slush funds?
You'll have the opportunity, quick rebuttal, you will have the opportunity to ask a question of each other twice tonight.
Thank
you.
You
have to get on to the issues.
I appreciate just the quick, because you know John said this repeatedly, and each time I wonder, because it just doesn't make any sense. The way that right now, the way that senior centers and youth programs, little leagues are funded is through discretionary allocations by City Council members. Now, of course, I have fought to make sure that the seniors in my district, the kids in my district, are served by those programs. There's nothing inconsistent with doing that, and also saying this is a bad system. You play by the rules the way they are. I've committed, and when the Daily News endorsed me, one of the reasons they gave was I have committed to change that abuse of the discretionary funding. I hope you would join me in making that commitment.
Okay.
The rules are what they are now. We should change those rules. They're bad rules.
Thank you, gentlemen. And now we turn to Erin, who has a question for Councilman Yasky.
Okay, Councilman Yasky, your opponent, as you heard, just knocked you for changing your position on a number of issues, most notably term limits. You proposed an amendment to term limits, asking that issue go to the voters, and when that amendment failed, you cast a crucial vote that extended term limits from 2 to 3 terms for the mayor and council. My question is, how can voters know that the promises you're making now won't be subject to change later on, and that you will, as controller, in fact, stand up to the mayor?
Well, two things. First of all, on the term limits, look, good people can disagree. I know that John and I disagree on this. I've always said I think term limits are bad policy. Certainly a 12-year limit is much better than an 8-year limit, and that's how I voted. It didn't benefit me. I'm not running for a 3rd term. I never sought a 3rd term in the council. I voted the way I thought was best for the city. And in terms of independence from the mayor, and I agree with you, it's critical that the next controller be able to stand up to the mayor and be a principled check and balance. It's also important that the person be able to work productively and be a productive partner. I've met with businesses over the last months, and they just want a city government that's working together, not fighting politically. But at the same time, yes, we need a controller who can be independent and stand up when that's required, and I've done it repeatedly. The mayor supported tax breaks for luxury developers, something called the 421A program. I fought that fight to get rid of, and we succeeded in getting rid of a lot of those tax breaks. You know, John was on the sidelines in that fight. I stood up when the mayor wanted to shut down the Red Hook container port, which was is still hundreds of good paying jobs for people. A lot of those people don't have a high school degree. They're making good money. We need those jobs in the city. John was on the sidelines in that fight. So I know that John has done a lot of press conferences, and he's, stands up to the mayor in the sense of press conferences. We need someone that can fight a sustained fight on an issue and actually get some results. I think that's why New York Times endorsed me, Chuck Schumer. I think that's why Melinda Katz, who, again, I think ran a very strong campaign in this very race, when she came out and endorsed me, I think it was because I've shown that both I can work productively and stand up and be that check and balance.
Okay, Councilman.
Well, sure. You keep saying that good people can agree to disagree. I mean, it's a lot more complicated than that. The issue was never term limits, and I think the people of New York understand that. People have different opinions on term limits. I myself, I don't believe in term limits. I voted no in both referendums. But the fact of the matter is that the majority of the people voted yes. They passed term limits twice. They affirmed term limits. And so the issue was not whether term limits are good, whether 3 terms make more sense than 2 terms. The issue was always, how do you go about changing a law that was put on the books by the people through a referendum, through 2 referendums? And so that is a question of basic trust, public trust. And when you went, Councilman Yasky, when you went around for months talking, telling your constituents, telling good government groups, telling your colleagues that you are not going to support a change in the term limits without going back to the voters, we took you at face value. And then at the last minute, you tried to introduce some kind of resolution that you knew was dead on arrival. And then you wound up voting yes. It was such a close vote that your vote could have, if you had voted the right way, that like you promised, then it may have altered the outcome of the term limits discussion, and maybe we would not even be having this discussion now, because the term limits as passed by the people of New York would still be kept intact. And so it is your promise that you would oppose the change, and then this last minute resolution that very few people understand, and then your vote to actually change the term limits and subvert the will of the people. That's why I gotta say, Dave, you know there are a lot of people who are talking about the 3-headed Yasky on the street. And that is the one incident that they refer to the most. It is about public trust. It is about your record as an elected official. It's about the votes that we cast as elected officials.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. And now we're going to move on to the first round of what we call our cross-examination. And that's where each candidate can ask his opponent a question. Now, Councilman Yasky, you go first. You have the opportunity to ask Councilman Liu a question.
Okay, thank you. John, you have repeatedly said that I have, your words, I believe, tell me if I'm wrong, no financial experience. I know just yesterday, the day before, your campaign put out another statement that said that. That would certainly be news to the people I worked with at the city budget office, where I built economic models to predict how much revenue city taxes would bring in. It would be news to the clients I represented in billion-dollar transactions to acquire companies, issue stock. I think that would be news to Felix Rodin, one of the financial giants in the history of the city, who helped save the city in the fiscal crisis of the 70s, who's endorsed me as the best person for this job, the best fiscally responsible person to shepherd the city through this difficult time. Be news to former controllers Jay Golden and Liz Holtzman, both of whom have endorsed me and again said that I'm the best person for this financially sensitive and challenging position. I think it would be news to the New York Times and New York Daily News. My question is, John, would you finally withdraw that unsubstantiated accusation? Once again, you can say what you like in a campaign, but at some point the facts do catch up with it. I would ask you to stop making that unfounded charge.
I have said consistently that I have a great deal of financial expertise, that I have spent most of my career in the private sector, specifically in finance. 14-year career, straight out of school, And then I was elected to the city council, and I've been there, serving there for 8 years. And I'll be able to combine that kind of experience, the private sector financial experience, along with the deep knowledge of city government that I've gained in 8 years in the city council. And that combination of experience is really the kind of combination that the people of New York need in a city comptroller. And to do so with an independent approach, someone who's not going to be tied into all these different people. Now, it's an impressive list of endorsements. I have to hand it to you, Dave.
Thank you.
And I guess that's the kind of list of endorsements and connections that you make over a career, a lifetime of being in politics and government. I think you would agree, right, that you've spent most of your career and life in government and politics. And that's one of the major distinctions that I've sought to draw for the people of New York, that's something that sets you and I apart, that I have spent most of my career in the private sector, specifically in finance. And now that I have a deep knowledge of government, I'll be able to bring it all together in the Office of Comptroller. Someone who's going to be able to audit the books very regularly of every single agency. Someone who has a pension background. Again, I was a pension actuary for 14 years before being
Mr.
elected
Luke.
to the City Council.
Is that John's question?
That was my answer to your question.
Oh, then can I just, on that last point, because again, John, you've made this point a number of times, saying that your private sector background, not a politician, and I'm very proud of both my private sector experience and my government experience, and you should be as well. And you've of course ran for office the first time at age 22. You ran for the city council at age 29. So I don't think there's anything the matter with loving politics, as you surely do. And I love politics. I think it's a noble calling to try and serve the public. My problem with when you keep drawing that distinction isn't that there's anything wrong with wanting to be in politics. My problem is with not being straightforward about it. I think that it's very important, especially for a controller, to be straightforward with New Yorkers at these challenging times. More than ever, we've seen the Bernie Madoffs and we've seen all the financial shenanigans. We don't have time for that now. We can't afford that now. We need a controller who will be honest with New Yorkers.
Well, remember what I just said about the glass houses and people who live in them. Here again, you talk about someone, Dave, you ran for a position in Washington, D.C. You ran for district attorney. You ran for borough president. You ran for Congress. You ran for city council. Now you're running for city comptroller. So the fact of the matter is that it is very clear. I have a 14-year career in finance and the last 8 years in the city council. The vast majority of my career has been in the private sector. It has been in finance. And the reason I bring that up is that now, more than ever, when we do have so many budget cuts and when it is very difficult for government to make all the balances, that we need someone who's going to have this outside perspective, a very demanding approach to city government in terms of what it should be doing.
Okay, gentlemen, point counterpoint.
All right, but he got that extra
this
one
is
there.
the
Just very
last
quickly.
one, and then we have to move to Mr. Liu's question.
And again,
Go ahead.
I'm not saying there's anything the matter with wanting to be in politics. I'm saying the problem is not being straight about it. And again, would Crane's...
And I have been straight about it.
Well, would Crane's New York, the newspaper that represents the business perspective, would they have endorsed me if I wasn't the best candidate to create jobs and get the economy going again? And you talk about financial expertise, and then at the same time you support a tax on the transfer of stock, which would shut down Wall Street. That would kill the core of our economy and throw thousands of people out of jobs. If that's your notion of financial expertise, I don't think that's right for city controller.
Well, what I support is an equal opportunity for everybody here in New York City, and to make sure that the services are delivered for everybody in New York City. And I mean, congratulations on the Crane's endorsement. I mean, the fact of the matter is that I'm not hiding behind endorsements here. I'm talking about my professional qualifications for this position.
Okay, now, Mr. Liu, Councilman Liu, it's your chance, and I have to stick to the time limits on this one, gentlemen. Your opportunity to ask Mr. Yatsky a question.
Okay, so in deference to Dominic and Erin before, when we were talking about the discretionary funding and the slush funds that you were heavily engaged in, you started talking about, Dave, senior centers and little leagues. In fact, that's what you mentioned at a debate we had in Brooklyn a couple of months ago. But how do you explain the $55,000 that you gave to an organization that is a phantom organization? And you gave that money to an organization that paid the salary of someone who then backed you in your failed bid for Congress. Oh, and by the way, that bid for Congress was for Shirley Chisholm's seat, a seat that was a Federal Voting Rights Act seat that you moved your residents into that district so you could run in that election, and then right after you lost that election, you moved right back out of it. How do you explain the $55,000 that was ultimately connected to your failed bid for Congress?
You know, John, when you make a serious charge like that, you really ought to have some facts to back it up. And when you say phantom organization, that was money that went to something called the Neighborhood Assistance Group that funds Little Leagues, a soccer league and a basketball league that operate in Park Slope, where I represent, and that kids in my district participate in. And it's an organization that received funds from the city government for 2 years before I put in a discretionary application for them. And by the way, when you keep saying the slush fund that you've been involved in, again, all 51 council members, you included, and me, we direct funds to organizations that serve our districts. I've been clear, that's a crummy way to do it. Individual politicians shouldn't be handing out money like that. We should change it to a fair, open, transparent process. But as long as that's the process, I've got to make sure that the kids and the seniors in my district get the services that they're entitled to. So it's the problem with that is, again, it's part of the pattern of just simply untrue and misleading statements that you've made throughout the campaign. When you say you found 2 sets of books at the MTA and the Daily News says not true, New York Times says significantly embellished, again, not my words, newspapers' words. And so, but when you make a charge like that against somebody who served in public, and I value my reputation and my reputation for integrity. When Chuck Schumer endorsed me for this job, he said it was specifically it was because of the honesty and integrity that I've shown throughout my time in public service. You ought to have some facts to back it up.
And Dave, you know, the reason I bring that up is because you're the one who consistently says that discretionary funding should be banned and done away with. And I have consistently said that while there are some cases where it makes sense to provide funding for organizations that run Little Leagues, that support senior centers, and that there needs to be that kind of power of the purse retained in the legislature. I'm not the one who's saying get rid of it. I'm simply saying that there is a need. And so I applaud you on getting so much more money in discretionary funding to your groups. But then don't turn around and say, well, it should be banned after you get more than 48 of the 51 members in the city council. And let me ask you something about the organization that you talked about. The 55,000. Well, the fact of the matter is that, you know, you stated to a newspaper that you never actually saw that organization in operation. Did you attend any of those Little League games?
First of all, I attended dinners that the parents went to where they said thank you very much for the help with the Little League. I go to my own kids' soccer games. I wish I had time to go to every soccer game going on in my district. So that's, and when you say, you know, it's inconsistent to direct funds to organizations that serve my constituents and then say we should get rid of the discretionary fund process, I guess I think New Yorkers are smart enough to see through that. I think New Yorkers are smart enough to understand that I can say, yes, I want to make sure that kids in Park Slope and seniors in Greenpoint are served, but then say, we should change that process for going forward.
Time's up, gentlemen. You'll get another opportunity to ask each other a question. It's now time for the lightning round, where I will ask questions that can only be answered with the words yes or no by the candidates. Both candidates will be required to answer the question. And so I'll start with you, Mr. Liu. Would you fire an employee because of something they wrote on the internet?
Yes.
Mr. Yatsky?
No, I mean, not necessarily.
No. Well, yeah, it depends on what they wrote.
You said yes, I believe, and
yes.
You said no. Next question. Mr. Yatsky, would you hire a relative in the Comptroller's office?
No.
Mr. Liu?
No.
Mr. Liu, as Comptroller, will you divest from all companies that do business with Iran?
Yes.
Mr. Yatsky?
Yes.
Mr. Yatsky, regardless of how well it could be enforced, do you think sending text messages should be banned while crossing the street?
No.
Mr. Liu?
I do believe so, yes, because
Yes,
it
okay.
poses a danger for other
Okay,
people
thank
as
you.
well.
Mr. Liu, do you prepare your own taxes?
No.
Mr. Yatsky?
I review them, but no, first, a
Mr.
professional
Mr.
prepares
Yatsky?
them. No.
So, no, okay.
I review too before I sign it.
Okay, okay. Mr. Yatsky, would you refuse to take contributions from people or companies managing the city's money?
Yes.
Mr. Liu?
Yes, I've been saying that for several
thank you.
months.
Mr. Liu, do you have more than 5 credit cards?
No.
Mr. Yatsky?
No.
Mr. Yatsky, should smoking be banned in cities' beaches and parks?
No.
Mr. Liu?
No.
Mr. Liu, should Conan O'Brien have replaced Jay Leno on The Tonight Show?
Yeah.
Mr. Yatsky?
Yes.
Mr. Yatsky, have you ever taken an illegal drug besides marijuana?
No.
Mr. Liu?
No.
That's the final lightning round question. And so now we turn back to Aaron, who has a question for Councilman, I believe, Yatsky.
Yes, Councilman Yatsky.
Yes.
The two of you have similar positions on a lot of issues. One area of exception is the question of whether new city employees should, in these tough financial times, make larger contributions to their pension funds or accept reduced benefits. Do you think that your position on that issue, which is somewhat more in favor of these kinds of changes than Councilman Liu's, has cost you labor endorsements? Most labor endorsements seem to be going to Councilman Liu.
You know, I'm sure there've been political consequences, but I always take my positions based on what I think is right, and you let the politics sort itself out later. And I'd say 2 things. First, I do want to talk very directly to city employees and city retirees. And first, I want to say this is your money at stake most directly in the Comptroller's office. You need somebody that, and you can just ask in your gut, who will do the better job with honesty and integrity in safeguarding the money that you are relying on for your retirements. And I understand 100% how much people are relying, especially retirees now, are relying on their pensions. I pledge to you a Comptroller's office that is run with thorough professionalism, no politics. Now, on the question of pension reform, you know, we've got to make sure that the city can keep doing what it needs to do for the people that are relying on us. There's talk about closing senior centers and closing Meals on Wheels programs. We've got to keep the police on the street. We can't let class size balloon again. We've got to pick up the garbage and keep the streets safe. And the contributions to the pension system have gone from $1 billion to over $6 billion. Now, something's got to give, and I guess what I would say is I do think that I'm being honest with voters and indeed with city employees when I say we've got to tackle this challenge head on. It doesn't do anybody any good to pretend that things aren't true when they really are. That's what happened with General Motors, and you look what happened there. Now, I am committed to working together with the workforce, with leaders of the workforce, to make sure that we have pension reform that works for everybody and that makes sense and that allows the city to do what it needs to do. And that is my commitment to New Yorkers.
But do you think your position is what cost you union endorsements?
I can't speak for other people why they made the decisions they made. I only know that when the New York Times endorsed me, they said it was because I was the best qualified for this job. When the Daily News said that I am by far the best candidate for the job, they cited a record of experience and getting real results on affordable housing and jobs. When Crane said I was the person best suited to help get the city through these critically difficult times, they cited my record of accomplishment. People who have endorsed John, they're going to have to speak for themselves.
Do you think your opponent was just telling the unions what they wanted to hear?
And again, I can't speak for John's motives in what he says. I do think that he's wrong when he says we don't need pension reform. I think that just ignores the plain facts of a $5 billion budget gap before we even start talking about budget reforms, pension reform. So I do disagree with him on the substance. There are real differences. That's why voters have got to go to the polls on September 29th and choose, because this is the future of your city at stake. There are real differences between the two candidates here. I'm asking for the support of New Yorkers because I think my record shows that I will do the best job of getting rid of waste in the budget and helping bring jobs back into the city.
Okay, Councilman Liu, were you just telling the unions what they wanted to hear?
Certainly not. There were many. Councilman Yaski tried to get the support of everybody, as did I. And the fact of the matter is, let's talk about the honesty, because you do bring it up quite a bit, Dave. The honesty, honestly, we do have a $5 billion budget deficit to deal with over the next 9 months before the beginning of the next fiscal year. And the rhetoric that's behind this new pension tier, which you've embraced, Dave, in terms of imposing it on workers without collective bargaining, I've never said that we should not look at pension reform. All I've said is that we have to go through the collective bargaining process. But to imply that pension reform is needed right now because we've got a $5 billion budget deficit, that's just not being honest on the issue. The fact of the matter is that a new pension tier would take years. It wouldn't take 9 months. It would take 9 years, 8 to 10 years before making a dent in the city's budget. So let's figure out what real solutions are necessary to plug the budget deficit. I've proposed, and I've readily agreed to, even though it's politically unpopular to say so, agree to new revenue streams that you certainly have not been able to agree to. I've talked about how we must make the city's income tax system more progressive, more fair to all of the people so that we can continue to deliver the services here and plug that $5 billion deficit. Would you agree that that would be one way, probably the most likely way to plug the $5 billion deficit in the next 9 months?
Can I respond? Because when John says, of course I've sought the support of labor leaders, I've sought the support of people in the city workforce, individuals as well as the leaders. But what I haven't done is tell people anything that I think they want to hear just to get their support. When Barack Obama ran for president and he said, I'm going to tell people what they need to know, not what they want to hear, I was inspired by that, because the whole time that I've been in politics and public service, that's what I've tried to do. And it's true, sometimes there's a political cost to doing that, but I really think that at the end of the day, a reputation for being honest and addressing the issues head on with integrity serves you best. And whether it serves you best politically or not, it's the right thing to do. That's how I was brought up, and that's what I'll continue to do as city controller.
And that's certainly the way I've earned my endorsements as well, and I'm proud of my endorsements. The fact of the matter is that I tell people the way it is, and that I'm proud that people value me for the objective analysis and conclusions that I make as a member of the City Council and certainly as comptroller. And in fact, at least one of the editorial boards that actually gave you the endorsement, Dave, had strongly intimated to me that if I would just go along with the pension tier 5 as something that should be imposed for future employees, that the endorsement would be in the bag for me, and I refused to do so. So it's about objectivity.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Now I have a question for you, Councilman Liu. One of the mayor's top political operatives, that is Mayor Bloomberg, Howard Wolfson, has been extremely critical of how the pension fund has been managed by the current controller, Bill Thompson, saying, as you know, that it is underperformed compared to other municipal pension funds. I want to know specifically, what would you do different than Bill Thompson when it comes to running the city's pension fund?
Well, as I said before, I believe that Bill Thompson has done a fine job as comptroller. I've said that I'll do a far better job. I've told Bill that, and I certainly expect to do so. And I will bring my pension actuarial experience to the table immediately from the outset. I will put in place managers that will be responsible for the day-to-day operations of the comptroller's office, and I will directly hire and evaluate them on a regular basis to ensure the highest level of professionalism and integrity in the office of the comptroller. And I will also seek an investment strategy that saves money, that saves management expense fees by way of simplifying the portfolio in a way that it is not as complicated. It would reduce the management fees, at the same time restore the confidence among our workers and retirees. And just reducing the management fees, that's a 2% saved is 2% earned on the pension funds. And that is really key to ensuring the long-term integrity and solid foundation of our future retirees.
Thank you, Councilman Liu. Councilman Yatsky.
Well, first of all, I don't agree with Mr. Wolfson. I think that the performance of Bill Thompson under Bill Thompson of the pension funds has been about consistent with other very large funds, California's, New York State. But certainly there is definitely room for improvement. What I've said is I will keep the commitment to what are called alternative investments, so that in 2010 you just can't have a diversified portfolio that's only publicly traded stocks and debt securities. You also need alternative investments, private equity and real estate, but we should have a much smaller group of managers that will save on fees. It will make it much easier to track their performance and get rid of the managers that are not performing. I've also said I will put all the information online so that New Yorkers, pension beneficiaries, and all New Yorkers, because it's taxpayers' money too. If there's a shortfall, taxpayers have to make it up. I've said I'll put it all online so that they can see who's managing the pension money, what kind of returns they're getting. That's the best check. Sunlight is always the best check.
Thank you, Mr.
The best source of
Yatsky.
accountability.
And now we return to our cross-examination. Now this time, gentlemen, we're going to have to be direct. A quick question and then the response. Councilman Yatsky, you have the opportunity again to ask Councilman Liu a question.
Well, John, I guess I still don't really understand your position on pension reform. Are you saying that we can have pension reform only if the labor leaders agree with it?
What I'm saying, and I've been very clear about this, is that it should be part of the collective bargaining process. To simply impose a new pension tier on future employees, that will bring us back to the problem we faced a number of years ago when the starting pay for police officers was so low that the administration, in fact, had to backtrack on that and offer higher compensation because there was a problem with recruiting and retaining officers. What I have said is that it should be part of the collective bargaining process and that people should be brought to the table. Just like earlier this year, the CSEA came to terms and agreement with Governor Patterson, just like last month, the United Federation of Teachers came to agreement with Mayor Bloomberg and the administration. It's about figuring out how best to move forward. I think everybody understands that we have a difficult budget deficit to deal with, not only in the coming year, but for a few years to come, projected out, on a projected basis. And so,
was that a yes or a no?
I have answered your question, Dave. The answer
is a yes or no. I said, are you saying pension reform only if the labor leaders agree to it?
I have said that pension reform in a collective bargaining process. Collective bargaining means that everybody sits down, understands the issues, and does not look at one issue isolated from everything else. You can't.
I'll take it as a no. I'm not trying to be impolite. I just want to. Dominic said clear question, clear answer.
Thank you for
through the collective bargaining process.
Okay, now Councilman Liu, it's time for your clear question of Mr. Yatsky.
My clear question is that, Dave, in your commercials, you smear me as taking contributions from organizations that I have funded. Those contributions that were listed in the Daily News Report, by the way, a day before the primary last week, which I actually won handily, those contributions were from board members who volunteered their time and did not list their board affiliations on the employer information that I certainly gather very astutely. But what disturbs me, and I think a lot of people, is that you've collected tens of thousands of dollars of contributions from people who actually do business with the city, do business with the Office of the Comptroller. And I think you said that you don't have any plans, you're not looking to return any of those contributions. And furthermore, for months, I've been challenging you to ban all political contributions from anybody who does business with the Comptroller's office.
Okay.
I'm glad to hear that you finally answered the question that Dominic asked earlier and said that yes, you would, or no, you would not take any more political contributions.
Well, again, John, that's a nice charge to make. Of course, the facts are that you also have received well over $100,000 in contributions from real estate developers and other people who do business with the city. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that because it's consistent with the rules. I play by the rules as they are. I'm sure you play by the rules as they are. The rules permit small contributions from people who do business with the city. We've followed the rules the way that they are. So when you say, David, you've done this, but you don't point out that you have also received well over $100,000 of contributions from those very same sources, I do think that's misleading. And I certainly think it's misleading if there's any charge that I won't stand up to the special interests who have too much clout in the city, because it's exactly what I've done in the council. When I took on the real estate industry, the most powerful special interests in New York City, to close a loophole that was letting them build new luxury buildings and pay no property tax, I think that was the toughest stand against a special interest that we've seen in New York City in years. When I sued ExxonMobil to clean up the oil spill, same thing.
And I think many of your constituents would actually disagree with you on that point, that in fact the developers, the connections to the developers that you've had over the years have made many of your constituents uncomfortable. And in fact, that's why a number of the groups in your home neighborhood have endorsed me in my campaign for city
Mr.
comptroller.
Yasky, quick response to that.
Well, when the developers wanted to rezone North Brooklyn in my district, it had never been done before to say we're going to have zoning that insists, that requires affordable housing in a zoning, that the zoning forces developers to do affordable housing. That's what I insisted on. When that passed, it was on the front page of the New York Times because it was the biggest change in affordable housing policy in decades in the city, really since the time of Mayor Koch. And I'm very proud that Mayor Koch endorsed me in part because of my record on affordable housing.
But
Standing
I
up
have
to
to say
developers.
this, Dominic, I think actually the affordable housing allowances were actually all within a neighboring council district that council representative actually fought for, and that none of it was...
That part just, I know we're not back and
Well,
forth, that part
we
just
can
isn't
certainly-
true. If you look at the buildings that are being put up on the North Brooklyn waterfront in the council district I represent, they all have affordable housing as part of the project.
Okay, gentlemen, okay, thank you very much. In the remaining time that we have tonight, Aaron and I will ask as many questions as we can get to before closing statements. So I turn to you, Aaron.
Okay, Councilman Liu. There are, as you know, over 700 employees in the City Controller's office. What makes you qualified and able to manage this large an office? What is the largest organization that you have managed in your professional career?
In my professional career at the firm that I was with before joining the City Council, I managed a team of actuaries. We worked on some of the largest pension plans in the country. And it's a management experience that I gained, built up over 14 years, hiring employees, reviewing them, in cases where it was warranted, giving pay raises, and reviewing their on-time performance, how they stay within budget on these various projects that in many cases were to the tune of hundreds of thousands of dollars. This is the kind of management experience I bring to the table, and I'm very proud of the fact that in my 8 years in the City Council after I left the private sector, that I have been fortunate to work with a tremendous group of talented individuals who have been committed to public service and have been part of my City Council office, and that I have had extremely low turnover because they are committed to the same causes that I've been committed to, and that I've been able to work very closely with everybody on my staff. A staff of 700 is far larger than any staff that I have managed. That's to be sure, that is certainly true. I believe that would be true for Councilman Yasky as well. The fact of the matter is that it takes leadership and experience to manage a staff that large. And I bring with it my pension actuarial experience that is directly critical to the Office of Comptroller.
How large was that office? How many actuaries were you managing?
That was in our office of 50.
In an office of 50?
A team of 50, yes.
And you were the manager of all 50?
That's correct.
Okay. Councilman Yasky?
So I'm very proud of the management experience I would bring to this, although certainly, just like John, this would be the largest office that I will have managed. Now, when I was first elevated by Chuck Schumer to be chief counsel to the subcommittee that he chaired, I was at the time the youngest chief counsel of a subcommittee on Capitol Hill, and we got more done in that year. Hate crimes law, assault weapons ban, Violence Against Women Act. I was proud of the unbelievable productivity of that team that I managed here in the council. I think that I have developed a strong reputation for hiring talented people, not based on their political connections, as often happens in politics, but on the merits. And the reason I do that is I know that your staff is your most precious asset. That's the only way you get things done. That's why I've been able to get results on affordable housing, why I've been able to pass things like the tax credit for film and TV production that has doubled the number of production days, and those are good middle-class jobs that allow people to support a family, and that's just what I'll do as controller.
Okay, Mr. Yancey.
Okay, okay.
Thank you. As we move on now, the question is for you, the next one. What do you make of the White House involvement in state politics, and do you think Governor Patterson should run for election next year? If President Obama tried to convince you not to run for city controller, would you listen to him? And are you worried that Patterson could hurt your party's ticket next year?
Well, the decision about whether, Governor Patterson's decision about whether to run or not is up to him, and it's really not my place to opine on that. Of course, I have enormous respect for President Obama. I think that his leadership of the country at this unbelievably challenging time has been thrilling and inspiring. And, you know, I just am so I'm confident that if the president called me and asked me not to run, of course I would consider that very seriously. I can't imagine that would possibly happen.
Okay, Councilman Liu.
I think the president has some very big issues to deal with. The health care issue is something that's on the forefront of millions of Americans, and certainly here in New York City. And so I was a bit surprised at what's transpired over the last few days. I think Governor Patterson has a big job ahead. The election next year is a long way off. We're not even past this year's elections, obviously. And with the fall season coming back, we really need the governor to be able to focus on helping us fix some of the state problems that we need to deal with collectively. And so I hope that I am certainly going to be very supportive of Governor Patterson as he tries to fix some of the problems, as he tries to deal with some of the looming budget deficits at the state level in these next few months. And let's worry about the election in 2010, actually in 2010.
Thank you, Councilman Liu. Erin?
Okay. On the campaign trail, Councilman Yaski, you tout your work promoting film and television industry in New York City. What you don't mention is that you've taken $50,000 in campaign contributions from that industry. Is that at all a conflict of interest, and is that something that people should be concerned about?
You know, I've received, I haven't counted them, but I'm sure it's well over 100,000 in dollars of contributions from environmentalists who are proud or are pleased with the work I've done to get all the city taxi cabs to be gas electric hybrids and to promote the use of biodiesel instead of highly polluting petroleum heating oil. What I would say is people support my campaign because they believe in the work that I'm doing, because they believe that it's right for New York City. I'm very proud of the support we've had from every community in all 5 boroughs, from people like Chuck Schumer to leading state senators John Sampson, Eric Adams, to the head of the Caribbean American Chamber of Commerce, Roy Hastick, and many of the leading faith and clergy leaders in the city, A.R. Bernard at Christian Cultural Center, and Clint Miller at Brown Memorial. If I start naming them all, then you leave somebody out. So I'm very proud of the support that I've received. I believe it's because of the vision I've put forward for using the New York City Comptroller's Office in these times of challenge to get rid of waste in the budget, get the city economy back on track, and not just in general, but the specific plans for building a bioscience sector in New York, because those lab technician jobs, those are high-paying middle-class jobs. We need those here in New York City, not somewhere else in the country. For building up a green technology sector, again, we can't just rely on Wall Street to employ everybody in the city. We've got to build up other sectors that won't be minimum wage, that will be good-paying jobs. I've laid out a clear vision for how to do that as controller, how to use the audit staff as an in-house management consulting team to go agency by agency, get rid of the 10% of the budget in each agency so we can afford the things we need.
Okay, Councilman Liu, as you respond to that, I should mention that you've taken contributions from the towing industry at a time when you proposed legislation increasing towing rates. You've taken money from the taxi cab industry that you've overseen and the Transportation Committee. So you can respond on both matters.
Well, let me respond to some of the substantive issues here. On the issue of the film and tax credit, the credits for the film industry, I think it's it's one of the sectors of the city's economy. But I think we also have to realize that there have been some adverse consequences for some of the neighborhoods, and particularly small businesses throughout New York City, where they have not been apprised of any of the filming that goes on, where streets are closed down, sidewalks are closed down. And so on the one hand, yes, one industry that has helped you in your campaign certainly has thrived. On the other hand, there has been an economic cost to other people, small businesses, mom and pop shops who find themselves all of a sudden with no business because their street has been closed down or their sidewalk has been closed down. So it's certainly not as clear an issue as you make it out to be. And on the issue, I find it amazing that you keep saying that you change all of the 13,000 taxi cabs in this city to hybrid electric or clean vehicles. I mean, the fact of the matter is it's a small proportion of the more than 13,000 taxi cabs that now are hybrid electric. Okay, so again, here is an honesty question that we really need to put to the voters. People need to understand what the real records are.
Can we just, this is I think worth a debate because there's two subdivisions.
We have a minute left and one last question.
Good. On the taxis, when I first took this issue on, there were 0 hybrid cabs. Now, out of the 13,000, more than 2,000 gas electric hybrids cut pollution by 2/3.
And you and I worked on those. You and I worked on those package of bills.
And I was pleased that you finally let it pass through your committee. Just on film and TV, it's important because those are, you know, over 100,000 New Yorkers make their living in that industry. And of course, when people film in a neighborhood, it takes away parking, it's disruptive. Okay. But when you make a move, when someone makes a movie in New York, it's 300
but why isn't
jobs,
there
and
a
those
balance?
are Teamsters.
Why is there no balance for the mom and pop shops?
Gentlemen,
how do they get
Aaron has one quick final question. You're going to have 15 seconds each to answer it. Go right ahead, please.
It's an easy one. What is the biggest misperception you've heard about yourself, and why is it wrong?
I guess I'll go first. I guess, again, I was very disappointed to see the negative smear attacks that aired on TV beginning yesterday. And there's still time to take it off, Dave. I think we should, again, focus on the issues.
Okay.
Again, those are just your own ads and what newspapers have said about them. I don't, in politics, you have a thick skin. You can't worry about people saying things about you that aren't true. So I don't worry about misperceptions. I worry about how are we going to help New Yorkers get through this crisis. People are struggling with the most difficult economic circumstance they've had in their lifetimes. I want to be controller to help get through that.
Thank you, Councilman. And now it's time to move on to closing statements. Let's start with you, Councilman Yatsky.
These are tough times, and New Yorkers, we need a controller that will root out waste in every corner of the budget, not just because it's some abstract thing, but because every dollar that we waste, that's a dollar we need for textbooks for kids, for meals for seniors, to keep the senior centers and the firehouses open. We need to get rid of the waste so we can spend the money on what we really need, and as controller, I'll do just that. And you know I will stand up to the special interest because it's what I've done through my entire career, from my time working for Chuck Schumer, helping him pass the Brady Law and the Violence Against Women Act, to my time in the council, suing ExxonMobil to get them to clean up their oil spill, taking on the real estate lobby to close the tax loophole for luxury development, putting the whole city budget online, www.itsyourmoneynyc.com, because it's your money, New Yorkers. You should see exactly where it's being spent and what you're buying for it. We should have government that's open and transparent. I've already done it in the council. That's what I'll do as controller. That's why the New York Times endorsed me, the Daily News, and I ask for your support too on the September 29th. Please come vote in the runoff. Thank you. Thank you, Dominic.
John Lowe.
Thank you very much. I want to thank everybody for watching today's event. The fact of the matter is that it is a very difficult time, and I am running on my professional qualifications to be comptroller of the city of New York, to root out the waste that occurs in our city budget, especially because we have so many difficult budget cuts that are affecting people, to strengthen the pension plans, to use the contract powers to provide economic opportunities for everybody in the city. My campaign has been about inclusion. It has been about recognizing the beauty of New York City, the international capital of the world. And that's why I'm proud. I haven't mentioned too many of the endorsements so far today, but the fact of the matter is I have a broad spectrum of endorsements from all the unions, or practically all of the unions, from so many of the elected officials in all 5 boroughs, certainly more than any other candidate in this race. The good government groups, I'm proud to be strongly supported by Citizens Union, by organizations like the National Association of Social Workers, Tenants PAC, because I've talked about the issues that these organizations care about. And I've been endorsed by
Thank you, Councilman Liu.
a lot of other people,
We-
and certainly
we are out of
newspapers that represent every single community in this city. Dominic, I'll mention that
Okay.
even the Irish
Okay.
Echo said that I was the
Thank
most
you, gentlemen.
Irish
I
element
have to
in
move
this
on now.
race.
Thank you very much. That concludes tonight's debate.